we're going to start with the Hayom Yom. And today's the 8th of Tevis. And the Hayom Yom today is very sweet. It's about the importance of learning into our prayers. That the Tzemach Tzedek instructed all the tutors of his young grandchildren that in addition to regular studies, they should teach the simple meaning of the prayers. Once a month, the children came to their grandfather to be tested on this subject. So,
Chiddush.
Sorry?
That's a chiddush. Schools don't do that.
Well, it's a chiddush, and it's a really important thing. I mean, if you're davening and you don't know what your prayers mean, you know, it's really takes away a lot of the power of the prayers. And I always remember someone quoting Chani Juravel. Chani Juravel is a teacher here in Spring Valley, and she's a well-known teacher. And someone went to her shiur, and I quote her, she said, if you say one line and you really think about it, you know, if you don't understand all of your prayers, but at least, you know, one line, know what you're saying and spend extra time on that. You don't have to do all the davening. It's like one line.
Yeah.
Even, you know.
Bracha,
yes.
I just want to share with you, I don't know if you heard that Chani lost her father 2 days ago.
Yes, I did actually read that.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I think his name was Rabbi Finkelstein. Yeah, I did actually read that. So the importance of teaching the meaning of the prayers and to, you know, daven with an English siddur so that we can be connected to what we're saying. So that's officially the Hayom Yom, but I wanted to also jump ahead and learn the Hayom Yom from the 11th of Tevis, which is coming in a couple of days. And there's a really beautiful Hasidus teaching there, which I think is connected to the idea of Jewish feng shui. So feng shui is a Chinese system of how we can create holy, or not holy, but harmonious spaces in our house. And it's a system of where you should put windows and what things bring you good luck. So Jewish feng shui is having mezuzahs on your door and having holy books on your bookshelf. And, you know, a lot of our halachot actually create holy atmosphere in our home. So the Hayom Yom of the 11th of Tevis is really all about this. And given that we're in this completely crazy coronavirus mania, where everybody's preoccupied with the air that we breathe and how we infect each other or possibly can affect each other, infect each other. Everybody's preoccupied with the quality of air, which is very interesting. I want to say something about that in a moment, about air and the times that we're living in. But the Hayom Yom is man's life is dependent on the air around him. Without air, he cannot live, and the quality of life is dependent on the quality of air. In an atmosphere of Torah and mitzvot, there is healthy life. In a godless environment, life is diseased and one is constantly threatened with the possibility of being stricken with contagious maladies. So here's it written right here that if we don't have a God consciousness, we don't have that attitude of emunah and bitachon, and we constantly being threatened that, you know, the air can be contagious to us. The first general step in healing is to purify the atmosphere. And it's really going to be beautiful that the Hayom Yom is not talking about an air purifier, which is a good thing to have. I have one running in my yoga studio whenever I teach, but purification of the air is the task of every person familiar with Torah and Torah literature and is affected through the letters of Torah. So here's a very, very practical instruction that if you want to go through life in a healthy way, you need to purify the air. And if you're not living in an environment of purified air, you can be nervous and anxious that you are going to be vulnerable to contaminants. And as it says here, contagious maladies, that's the English translation. And yet the way you purify air, hi Shoshana, we're talking about the Hayom Yom and how it's important to purify the air around us so that we live in a healthy atmosphere. So it says the first general step in healing is to purify the atmosphere. Purification of the air is the task of every person familiar with Torah and Torah literature and is affected through the letters of Torah, the words, the letters. Each word is built up of all the different letters, and the 22 letters of the Aleph base are the fundamental building blocks of all reality. When reciting words of Torah while in the store or walking in the street or riding the subway, one cleans the air. This is an amazing thing. I mean, everybody's totally, crazy. 1 mask, 2 masks, 6 distance, not going here, not going here. And according to this idea that if you're reciting words of Torah, well, first of all, you're going to be changing your own headspace from one of fear, a fear-based headspace to a proactive headspace. And by actively reciting words of Torah, you keeping your head connected to Hashem. And I mean, it's really amazing to read it here. When reciting words of Torah while in the store or walking in the street or riding the subway, one cleans the air. Everyone knowledgeable in Torah must have some Torah memorized. Chumash, a pasuk, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted all Jewish children to know 12 pasukim so that they could have them in their pocket anywhere they went. So you say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Bereshis bara Elokim, es hashamayim, ve'es haaretz. Or a verse of Tehillim, or a verse of Mishnah, or Tanya, or something, so that all times and in all places he will be able to think and utter the holy words of the Torah. Now, when this was written, Corona wasn't happening, but it's a beautiful idea that has a lot of affect in the mind-body world. It has a beautiful ramifications in the mind-body world, that we are where our head is. And, from the science of epigenetics is an incredible system of healing that comes to us. I think Bruce Lipton is one of the major people behind this. And you can have your genetics that predispose you to certain maladies and inflammations. You can have, out there, hi Ilana, you can have out there lots of diseases and germs and everything. But if your headspace is positive and rooted in a belief and a trust in God and a belief and a trust in Torah, then you in a positive place. And according to epigenetics, no matter what's going on around you and no matter what germs are around you, your vibe, your aura, your positive attitude that is really humming and vibrating in all of your cells literally is going to protect you. So here, the Hayom Yom is saying this really strongly that, and I'll just read it again. In an atmosphere of Torah and mitzvot, there's healthy life. In a godless environment, which means there's no faith. So if there's no faith, there's a large opening for fear. Life is, and the word written here is diseased, and one is constantly threatened with the possibility of being stricken with contagious maladies. So the Hayom Yom is saying your best weapon against being infected by anything is trust and faith. And I would even extend it to simcha and joy and confidence, because that's going to give your immune system a tremendous boost. So that's like a fun way to begin. And just because we're talking about air, I want to talk about this great cosmic shift that began on December 21st, which is a really interesting thing to talk about, because it says, of course, Ein Mazal b'Yisrael, which means that in a way, as Yidden, we're not under the influence of the Mazalot or the zodiac signs and the stars on the planets. But on the other hand, God did create the world with a system of stars and planets. And the planets exert certain influences and the stars exert certain influences. And because we're Jews and we're connected to Torah, and our emunah and our bitachon and our actions can always change our mazal. We're not under the power of the mazalot, but it doesn't mean that the mazalot don't exert some influence in the world at large. And we know this to be true because all of our holidays have, or many of our holidays are expressions of the very mazalot. In the middle of Nisan is this experience of Pesach, and in the peak of Sukkot is the middle of Tishrei, and they all holidays that have a lot to do with their zodiac counterparts. So having said that, and there's much to say, and people who've come to my classes for a while know that I have a lot to say about it. I'll just say one thing, that Abraham was not destined to have children from what was written in the stars, but Hashem took him outside of his tent and told him to look down at the stars. And because he was attached to Hashem, he could rise above the astrological determination, and then he could have children. But there was an astrological determination that Hashem took him out of that system and took him above that system. So we have a system, it's out there. And on December 21st, there was this big shift, and people know there was Pluto and Saturn in the stars, in the sky, coming closer together than they've come in 200 years. So it's called some kind of a conjunct. But at the same time, there's this talk that we're moving from an age I thought we were moving from Capricorn to Aquarius, but it actually turns out we're moving from Pisces to Aquarius. I guess it's different ways of seeing it, but we're moving from a time. So either way, I'll explain to you what Aquarius is, because it's, if anybody's familiar with the 60s movie Hair,
the song,
this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. So it really is mamish now, for real, the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is an age of air. It's an air sign. So because it's an air sign, so the one way I heard it explained is we were in an age of Capricorn, which is an earth sign. And for the last 200 years, we've been busy with building and technology and doing and hierarchical society and different ways of being. The age of Aquarius is an age of air, and it's an age of ideas and an age of thought and an age of, instead of hierarchical relationships, it's an age of horizontal relationships. And it's very in sync with the idea that we're coming to a time of Mashiach, where thoughts and ideas and consciousness and kavona are, in a way, almost, I don't want to say more important than action, because we know from the Lubavitch Rebbe for sure, the beautiful quote, I think it's from him, Maisa hu ha'ika, at least it's a Chabad maxim, Maisa hu ha'ika, action is the most important, but really we're coming more and more to a place of thought and intention and connection that can transcend space and time and things like that. So this Hayom Yom about how we purify the air with the letters of Torah is very, very beautiful, because it's not just words on a page. It's really a reality that in a age that's has its theme that it's an air age, And it's about communication and about attitudes and about intention and about all these kind of fairy abstract ideas. So then what you're thinking and how you're thinking about what you're thinking is hugely important. And we're going to see that in this week's Parsha. The way that you frame and structure your thinking is vitally important. And just before I leave this introduction, it affects your health, the way you're thinking, what you're thinking. It doesn't just affect your emotions, and it doesn't just affect, you know, whether you're doing mitzvahs or you're not doing mitzvahs. It is going to affect your health, because if you're paranoid or fearful or anxious or constricted or angry or nervous or agitated, you're going to have maladies that are going to reflect all of those attitudes that are coming from the way you're thinking and feeling about things. So this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. It is actually for real. And as I've said many times, this is time to not just clean up our actions, which maybe was good for previous generations, you know, let's become frum, let's keep Shabbos, let's keep kosher, let's go to the mikveh. Now we've got to go to the next level. Let's do these things b'simcha, let's be kind to people in a different way, let's be sensitive, let's be, you know, aware of the way in which we do things and the energy and the vibe that we bring to what we do. This is going to become more and more important because, as I say, we are now in the age of Aquarius, which is a very messianic, it fits very well with the messianic shift that we are going through. And just like with zodiac or mazalot shifts, they don't come, as my good friend Shoshana was explaining to me the other day, and I'll quote her, they don't come in stages that can be defined with a line, and before you in the stage of a Capricorn, and now you're in Aquarius, and there's this straight line. It's kind of like a wave of something, and it's like a cloud, sort of, that's the word Shoshana used, but it's really an energy that starts coming in, and this energy of a messianic age being so beautifully in sync with this new age of Aquarius, it starts to come in, and it starts to shift, and it starts to change our way of being. But the emphasis is, it's not only about action anymore, it's now more and more about thought and intention and kavana, and seeing how one's thoughts and attitudes are actually sitting in one's own being and body. That is, you know, becoming important. So let's move into the Parsha, which is very exciting. And it fits very well actually into this theme that we've been talking about how do you think about things, and how do you view things, and how your attitudes are so vitally important. So we're coming into this week's Parsha. Sorry, it's nice to see you. So
Hi.
we're coming into the story with Yosef now, because of, so sorry, I just want to ask you
It's my keys. I'm sorry.
just to mute yourself. That would just be
Okay, I'm sorry.
all right. So we're coming into the story of this big confrontation between Yosef and his brothers, and it's very dramatic. Yosef managed to set everything up in Egypt that, well, Yosef himself didn't manage to set everything up. Everything gets set up, really, you could say, you know, it's much bigger players than Yosef, got himself very involved in the setup. But the way it is that Yosef is now in charge of all of Egypt. And because there's a famine in the world at large, everybody's coming into Egypt to get money, to get food. And Yosef is second in command to Pharaoh. And he makes lots of he sets everything up so everybody has to come to Egypt. They have grain. They followed Yosef's advice. They went through the 7 years of plenty. They're now 2 years into the famine, and Yaakov actually has enough food. The Yaakov's family has enough food in Eretz Israel. But Yaakov says to his kids, it doesn't look good that everyone's going to get food and we're not going. We don't want to, stand out. And he sends his sons to go into Egypt to get grain from Yosef, from Mitzrayim. And Yosef has set up guards at all the entrances to Mitzrayim so that as soon as his brothers come in, he's been advised. And now he's been, we know from last week, he's been setting things up. And he put his golden cup into Benjamin's bag, Benjamin being his real brother as opposed to his half brother. And now all the brothers have been called back in front of Yosef. Benjamin was framed, and the Pasha takes its name from its Vayigash, and it says Vayigash elav Yehuda vayomer, and he starts to speak, and he speaks to Yosef, and he speaks, and basically what he does is he stands up and defends Benjamin and takes responsibility in a way that is very typically Yehuda-ish. He takes responsibility and he basically says, I promised my father that nothing bad would come to Benjamin, and I'm going to take responsibility for him. And if anything bad should happen to Benjamin, I could never tell my father. He would die of grief. I absolutely can't let that happen. And so I'm going to stand up and I'm going to take responsibility for Benjamin. And, if there's anything that you want to do to him, punish him for the fact that you found this cup in his bag, I'm taking full responsibility. So that's very, very intense speech that Yehuda gives at the beginning of this parsha. Now, before we move on to Yosef's response to this, it's good to know that there's a play that goes on between Yosef and Yehuda. And Yosef and Yehuda represent two different personas. Yehuda is a persona of a person who messes up and does tshuva, messes up and owns his mess up, and in a way steps up from many downfalls and overcomes his, past, and overcomes some bad decisions and overcomes some issues. And he's the person who represents the Baal Tshuva. Yosef, on the other hand, we spoke last week at length and said that Yosef is the only person in the Torah who's called Yosef HaTzadik, and he's like the Tzaddik. He's got this incredible connection to Hashem. He's got this incredible blessing that whatever he touches seems to, because he's so aligned with his truth and he's so aligned with Hashem, that whatever he touches, somehow he has this incredible blessing, and he doesn't have so many struggles to get to where he is. So he's, in a way, the tzaddik compared to the Baal Tshuva. And it's interesting, I was reading an essay, and I think it was an essay by Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, that in the end, Yehuda's approach, and this is a little bit related to what we said about Yaakov, that Yaakov struggles, but he overcomes. And Yehuda struggles, but he overcomes. And even though Yosef was the one who had this incredible blessing, and in a way things were easier for him in a certain way, we are descendants of Yehuda, and Yehuda's lineage continues. And we all of us Jews that are in the world today are descendants of Yehuda and Benjamin, not Yosef. Yosef is part of the 10 tribes that have gotten lost, which hopefully we're going to be reconciled with when we have kibbutz galiot. But it's interesting that as a people, we Yehudim, we come from Yehuda, that this, just like Yaakov, this path of struggle, but coming back to the table, struggle, coming back to the table, owning up to even that which we've done, which wasn't perfect, is the model of Yehuda. And Yehuda has Malchus. Yehuda has Malchus. The Mashiach comes from the house of Yehuda. So it's an interesting comparison to the magic of the tzaddik compared to the effort and the hard work of the Baal Tshuva. And Yehuda is that and becomes, the house from which Mashiach comes. So that's the introduction. I want to share my screen, and I want to read with you what happens when Yosef, when Yehuda stands up for Benjamin, and he stands up for Benjamin. And before, let me just stop sharing just to say one more thing. Everything that Yosef has done with the brothers, all this orchestrating and this planting the the silver goblet in Benjamin's sack and framing Benjamin, it's all to see. Obviously, everybody's heard a million times. I'll just say it again. It's a test, right? Yosef has been orchestrating a test to put his brothers back in the same situation where the favored brother, right? Benjamin is the son of Rochel, and Yosef was the son of Rochel. They were the two sons of Rochel, and all the other brothers were either sons of Leah or sons of Bila or Zilpah. But Benjamin and Yosef are the two favorites because they were the sons of Rochel. By getting a situation where Benjamin is put into danger, the sons, the brothers, either have to stand up for one of the sons of Rochel or not. And if they do, they will make a tikkun on last time when they all ganged up on the son of Rochel, i.e. Yosef, and threw him into a pit. If they can do tshuva now, then they're different people. They've really changed. So let's see, when Yosef sees that Yehuda will take the blame on himself and do everything in his power to protect Benjamin, let's see what happens next. So this is the drama where we come in, and it's very beautiful to read it. And I'm going to read it with the Rashis. So let's see. So now it says, starting chapter 45. Now Yosef could not bear all those standing beside him, and he called out, "Take everyone away from me." So all of his assistants and his entourage, he sends everyone away. So no one stood with him when Yosef made himself known to his brothers. And it says that Rashi says, why did he send everyone away? He didn't want his brothers to be embarrassed of what they had done to him, because, they tried to kill him first, then they sold him to slavery. He could have been rotting in some dungeon somewhere, and that wouldn't have been very good. He wept out loud, so the Egyptians heard, and the whole house of Pharaoh heard. Everybody heard him crying. And Yosef says to his brothers, "I am Yosef." Let's read it in Hebrew. Vayome Yosef el Echav. He says, and Yosef says to his brothers, "Ani Yosef, ha'od avi chai." And is my father still alive? Ani Yosef, ha'od avi chai. And then his brothers couldn't answer because they were so shocked. And this is really beautiful. He says, "Is my father still alive? Is he depressed? Is he okay? Like, where is he? how is he doing? So it says, one of the Meforshim say, Yosef knew that his father was still alive. However, he thought that the brothers would be shocked when he revealed. So he asked, is my father still alive? Just to enter into a conversation. And then he wanted to ask them, how are your families? But they couldn't speak. And then he also said, don't think I'm going to kill you. Don't think, you don't have to be afraid of. I wouldn't be worse than Esav. Esav wanted to kill Yaakov, but while their father was alive, he would never do such a thing. So in a way, he was saying, you know, our father is still alive, right? Don't be worried. Don't be nervous. I'm not going to take revenge on you because our father, isn't he still alive? That's one of the Meforshim from Jonathan Ebershitz. Says, don't think that I would be worse than Esav. And then he says to them, please come closer to me. And they drew closer and he said, I am your brother Yosef, who you sold into Egypt. And he said he wanted them, they were embarrassed. He said, come close. And the Meforshim say he wanted them to see his bris, he was circumcised. Now, this is the most beautiful, beautiful thing. He says, I'll read it in Hebrew first. Va'ata al ta'atzvu. Don't be sad. Va'al yachar beinechem. And don't feel bad, whatever. Ki machartem oisi hina ki lemichya shelachani Elohim lifneichem. I'm sorry, that was not very well written, but don't be sad. Let it not trouble you that you sold me here, for it was to preserve life that Hashem sent me before you. This is an incredible line here. He's telling his brothers, don't be sad, don't feel bad. He's actually taking care of them. You don't have to feel guilty that you sold me here, for it was to preserve life that Hashem sent me before you. I mean, this is incredible, right? Va'ata and na al ta'atzvu. You shouldn't be sad. You shouldn't be sad. Why? Because shelachani Elokim, Hashem Elohim, Hashem sent me lifneichem. This is very powerful. Now, it's a really beautiful line. It's a beautiful piece of a moment of Chumash, a beautiful moment in Torah. And Jonathan Sacks has an incredible essay about this moment. And I want to share it with you, and it's really beautiful. Last week, I told you how Jonathan Sacks talks about the fact that Yosef was the first economist in the Jewish people, and how in the Nobel Peace Prize list of Nobel Peace Prize winners for economics, an incredible 36% were Jewish. And he mentioned Milton Friedman and this one and that one, and how Jews have a sense of, they seem to have a gift with economics, and how Yosef, when he interpreted Paro's dream, he didn't just interpret the dream and say, this is how it's going to be. He interpreted the dream, and as I explained last week, he then said, and so we need a plan, and we need a plan of action, so that God told you what's going to be. We need to, act on it, and we need to make sure that we take care of things. God doesn't just tell us things for our own pleasure and interest. He wants action from us. Hi, Ita, welcome. He wants action from us, and he wants to see us involved. So that was the lesson from last week, how Yosef was this incredible economist. And when he saw what was going to happen via the dreams, he created a plan. And we said that he used Bina and Chokhmah and was able to bring down what was in an idea into reality and into an action plan. Now Jonathan Sacks talks about Jews and psychology. And it's a beautiful thing. He says that, you know, if you think about the different big influences in psychology, we have so many Jews who contributed to psychology that that in Germany, psychology was called the Jewish science. And we have a natural desire to look at human behavior and try and help, you know, explain human behavior. So he talks about different kinds of psychology, movements in psychology, and he talks about psychoanalysis, which he talks about it in terms of this is a little too much information, but a Freudian thing that he argues is not really a Jewish approach. It's more Hellenistic, because I'll just read you here that they take the Greek myth of Oedipus as one of the key models, and Freud has a tragic view of the human condition, which is not really a particularly Jewish approach. It's more of a Greek approach. But then he brings out post-war psychotherapists who were not just Jewish by birth, but were very Jewish in their approach to the human soul. And he says, for example, Viktor Frankl, with his theory of logotherapy. And we know he was a survivor of Auschwitz, and his whole approach to psychotherapy was this idea of man's search for meaning. That if you have meaning in your life, and you can live through the hardest times of all, if you have meaning in what you're going through. And then he brings another person, Aaron T. Beck, who founded what is regarded as one of the most effective forms of psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy is that for patients suffering from depression, their feelings were often linked to very negative thoughts about themselves, the world, and the future. So if you could get them to think different thoughts more realistically, then they could have better control over their mood. So cognitive behavioral therapy is cognitive. Change the behavior of your cognition and you will have a better life. And the last person that he quotes is Martin Seligman, who's the founder of Positive Psychology, which aims not just to treat depression, but to promote what he calls authentic happiness and learned optimism. Because depression, Seligman argued, is often linked to pessimism, which comes from interpreting events in a particular way, which he calls learned helplessness, which means that you, instead of seeing a negative situation as just temporary, you start thinking that it's always going to be like this. It's my fault. I'm always getting things wrong. And then people start to think of things in a negative way, and instead of training yourself to think positively. So now he's going to say that Yosef was an incredible reframer of his circumstances. And we started talking about this last week, that what we can learn from Yosef is how he framed his experience. And if we look through it, right, he was hated by his brothers. He was abused by his brothers. He was thrown into a pit where scorpions and snakes could have bitten him to death. So that's huge trauma. He could have been in therapy for many, many years about that. That's hugely traumatic. Then he was saved only to be sold into slavery. He comes into slavery. He's working in the house of Mr. and Mrs. Potiphar, and he's framed, thrown into jail. He's in jail. His family have abandoned him. They know he's in Egypt, but nobody's like looking for them. Oh, you know, our brother was sold as a slave. Maybe we can look, you know, at the slave register and we can send him a care package. No, they've completely forgotten about him. He's in jail. He's in jail for 12 years. He's in jail before he's called before Pharaoh. He could have so much resentment, so much anger, so much distress, so much despair. But we know that he never has this. As we spoke last week, even in Potiphar's house, he had this good vibe and this good energy, so that Potiphar put everything in his house under Yosef's control. Right away, he was this positive person. The only thing that wasn't under his control really was Mrs. Potiphar. And then he goes into jail, and we see that right away when he gets into jail, the jailer likes him very much and puts everything in the jail under his control, because he has a positive attitude and he cares about people and he's looking at people. And then he sees all his brothers coming, and they're not looking for him. They knew he was there. They came to get food. 11 brothers, big, strong, strapping brothers. They're coming into Egypt anyway. It's not that hard. Oh, and this is another beautiful point that was made. It became very famous that a person who was a slave, a Jewish slave, was now the viceroy of Egypt. I mean, the brothers are so surprised that this guy is not their brother. Didn't they suspect, oh, our brother is a Hebrew, and he was sold into slavery. I mean, it was on all the newspaper headlines, you know, slave rises to power. It wasn't a secret. How come they didn't look for him? How come they weren't looking for him? They didn't want to find him. They were embarrassed. So Yosef could have a huge amount of basis to have negative thoughts and feelings. So Rabbi Sacks actually says that all these psychological approaches, cognitive therapy of Aaron Beck, and logotherapy of Viktor Frankl, and positive psychology of Martin Seligman, these are all very similar to the teachings of Chabad Hasidus. Why Chabad? Chochma, Bina, Da'as. Put your head into the right place. Make sure that your thinking is correct. Let your thinking dictate to you how you want things to be, how you govern from your chokhmah, your bin, and your da'at. That's going to influence your chesed, your gevurah, and your tiferet, which is what? It is your kindness, your self-restraint, and your compassion. That all of these things are coming from how you think about things. And so he says that he wants to suggest that Yosef was, in a way, the first cognitive therapist. He took all of his experiences in life and he chose to emphasize the positive. He chose to see it with a meaning. He chose to liberate himself from depression and learned helplessness. It's really amazing. And then when he sees his brothers, he says, you guys shouldn't be depressed. You guys shouldn't feel guilty. You shouldn't be upset, because the whole thing was God's plan. It was all God's plan all along. So this is really amazing, that the idea of how we think about things, how we frame things, being such a crucial part of how we go through life. And how we go through life, how we shape our experiences. And let's just go back I'm just going to share the screen one more time, that we go back here, and he says here, and God sent me before you to make for your remnant in the land and to preserve it for your great deliverance. He doesn't even say, God sent me. He doesn't say, God sent me to save the Egyptians. God sent me to save myself. He says, the whole reason why I was here was for the sake of the family, really, of you and the family. And now he said, you did not send me here. Let's carry on. But God sent me here. And he made me a father to Paro and a lord over all his household and a ruler over the land of Egypt. Now go and tell my father that I'm still alive. I mean, that's incredible. His attitude and his emunah completely shaping. And then the climax of the story, and I was saying this over, and with this I'll end and open to questions and comments. But the climax of the story is later on in the Parsha, when Yaakov passes away, and this isn't written really in the text, but when Yaakov passes away, Yosef has made a pledge, to take him and bury him, and all the brothers and Yosef go to bury Yaakov in Ma'arat HaMachpelah. And the way that they go is not a direct way. They actually go on a detour. And where do they go on their detour? Yosef takes them via the pit where he was thrown in on the way to Ma'arat HaMachpelah. And the brothers, can you imagine the brothers? Their heart is beating and they think, now our father has passed away. Now that our father isn't here to look after us, and Yosef's not afraid of his disapproval anymore. Now he's bringing us to the pit to take his revenge. And they're terrified. And I think this is an incredible moment. Yosef brings them to that pit, and then he says, thank you to Hashem. He praises Hashem, and he says again to the brothers, don't worry, I'm not going to take revenge. God did this because this is what God wanted to happen. So I'm just going to end with that and say that Alavai, with Hashem's help, we should be able to learn from all of these. We should be able to learn from Yosef, his incredible example of being a cognitive behavioral therapist, keeping his head in the right place, keeping his head with trusting God. It's all going to work out. I'm a slave. I'm in a pit. Okay, I'm in a pit. It'll be what it'll be. I'm kind of cool. I'm on a wagon going down to Egypt. Okay, my brothers sold me, but this is where I am. Hashem has some plan. I'm in Potiphar's house. I'll do my best job. Something's going to become manifest. I'm not miserable and bitter and angry and have bad vibes. I'm going to wait for the plan to unfold. There's going to be a plan that's going to unfold. And in the meantime, I'm going to be upbeat and positive. Oh, now I'm in jail. Oh my gosh, can it get any worse? Well, I'm still going to be upbeat and positive and believe Hashem has a plan. And it says Yosef didn't even daven to get out of that, jail, because he felt like there must be a reason why I'm here. And the Meforshim tell us that the only time when he davened was after 12 years. And the minute he davened of Hashem, what am I doing? Can you get me out of this dungeon or prison or whatever? That's when Paro had his dream. But up until then, he's like, Hashem wants me here for a reason. And we know what the reason was. He was there when the butler and the butcher came. The butler and the baker, I'm sorry. It's because he needed to be the one to represent, to be, that the butler could say, there's this boy in jail who knows how to interpret dreams. And then he comes and he's always reframing and always trusting and believing in Hashem. So just to wrap it up with our Hayom Yom from the very beginning, that when you walk through life and you're purifying the air around you with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet by learning Torah and saying words of Torah and psukim, the Hayom Yom actually said you purify the air. You give yourself like a bubble of positive, faithful, faith-filled energy that becomes your immune system. That's your bubble, that you're walking into potentially hazardous environments. Of course, you don't have to be stupid and, you know, be normal and sensible, but in terms of your attitude, instead of being fearful, you're infusing yourself with this connection to positive vibe and trust and faith, and then it should be good. So l'chaim to living with the lessons of our first behavioral therapist, example of good framing and reframing, Yosef Hatzadik, and Shavua Tov, and I'll pause the recording.